go into that screen, can you change what group they're in on the fly if you want to?
To change a particular account's group? Yeah. I can go in and pull up any particular account and edit it. I can change the group that they're in. Typically the way that you would do that, rather than just changing their group, most of the time the association, the way that someone gets into the group is by applying a usage plan to the account. And so let me just pull up a usage plan so you can see that interface. So the configuration for the usage plan has a lot of the same fields that you see in the account. And that's because when the account gets created and the plan gets applied to the account, the values from the plan go onto the account. So you could go into a particular account, change their account group, and just hit update, and that would take effect. But most of the time, the way that you would do that is by applying a different plan to the account, because usually you want to have, this whole set of configuration that you've got for a particular plan to be applied to the account. But yes, you can just make a change on the fly if you want.
Sorry, one last question
Yeah.
too. On a group, the expiration date. If you change the expiration date in the group,
You're talking about a shared credential group?
no, because right now we have a group that never expires right now. So if you went into that group,
Well,
change that.
so when we're talking about expiration, there's a few different places that an expiration value can be set. If you're talking about a shared credential group, sorry, shared credentials. So there's an expiration value on the shared credential of when that particular credential can be used. And there's also configuration as to how long session times can be. Within a particular account, there's an expiration date. If we look at an account group, however, there is not an expiration on an account group. An account group is a pretty basic configuration. You just link it up to a particular policy. However, the usage plan has some configuration where you can control this. So we've got this lifetime section, which basically tells us how long that account will be active for. And once that time hits, they either have to purchase a new plan. A plan can be a recurring plan, so it may automatically happen. You can set up a plan to be, billed on demand. So when a person runs out of usage, it can be applied. But there's the lifetime of the account. There's also a time plan piece of the usage plan, which is basically it's a little bit confusing when you're seeing it for the first time, but the lifetime is basically the expiration date of the account. And a time plan is, let's say, I want to grant you 24 hours of usage. And you might use an hour a day for the next 24 days and go through that time that's been allotted to you. Or if you have 5 devices on the network, all of those devices are pulling from that time that's been added to your account. So that's another place, another way that gets set. So it depends on what type of group you're talking about and exactly what context you're referring to the expiration in. But what was it that you were trying to accomplish with the expiration?
I think he's talking about, we have a group that's set up for the users, the authorized users.
Okay.
And when they sign in, it tells them, your session will not expire.
Okay.
It doesn't expire forever.
Uh-huh.
Where is that?
Okay, so in the captive portal configuration, there is what's called a landing portal. So there's two different scaffolds in here, the splash portal and the landing portal. The splash portal is obviously what redirects you to the portal, go through, login, that sort of thing. The landing portal is what gets applied to the policy that you're ending up in after you've authenticated.
Mm-hmm.
And within the landing portal, there's some configuration that controls the session limits. So, for example, we have the session limit here, which it's unrestricted by default, but you can set, you can set like an 8-hour session limit. So it's like once you log in, you can stay active for 8 hours, but then it's going to log you out, and you have to log back in. You can leave it unrestricted, and you can also rely on the idle timeout, which is basically the amount of time that a user can remain connected but not active on the network before their session gets killed. So if you are not yet familiar with the way the licensing and that sort of thing works in the RxG, your license is based on simultaneous login sessions. So if you have let's say you have unrestricted login session limits and you've got a really long idle timeout and you have a very transient user population, then as people come in and they connect to the network and maybe they're on it for a few minutes, they check their email, and then they just put their phone away or whatever, their session is still active. If you've got a lot of people doing that, and you have more people than you have licenses, then you're going to run into a situation where people can't log in anymore. So it's important to be able to manage the session time and that idle value, so that as you set it to your network and how frequently you want to have people logged out. If you're using automatic login, which allows basically when the device is seen on the network, background automatic login will automatically create a session as soon as the device shows up in the DHCP lease table or the ARC table, and it will log them back in. So this allows you to keep your idle timeout fairly low, and when a person connects, they check their email, and then let's say they leave the building and their device is disconnected from the Wi-Fi, we can reclaim that session fairly quickly, and then when they come back and they show up on the network again, automatically log them back in so that they don't have to go through the captive portal process again.
Do you have a threshold for what's considered idle, other than just not on the AP anymore?
It's not whether you're on the AP, it's whether there's traffic, whether you have TCP states.
Okay, well these phones, like, they maintain some sort of TCP state all day long, at least just a Google account or Apple Cloud. Is there a way to kind of work on that and say that you gotta have many sends and resets going on in a period of time?
You can change, within the system options, you can change your settings for how aggressively states are killed and that sort of thing. So if you have like a shorter state timeout, then it's going to it will affect that, but it's not going to change the fact that, if the device is still sending traffic, if you want to do that and make it so that, your device, basically where your session gets killed, when your device is not sending anything for just like a minute or two, you would have to set that idle timeout very low. The thing
So
to be aware of is
for
that
an idle threshold, like, could I set it to say that I gotta move at least 100 kilobits per kilobytes over a 10-minute period to be considered idle?
no, I don't think so. That's not a tunable value.
Okay.
It's basically if the device is sending traffic, it's considered active on the network.
Okay.
So anyway, the landing portal kind of controls that process of how long, when you log in, you see the, in the post login page, your session is good for this many hours and minutes. That's where that's coming from. There's also, like, in a shared credential group, you can specify a session time limit for a shared credential login as well. So there are various places that can affect that, but basically when the session gets built, it's pulling that information from one of those places, from the landing portal configuration, or from the the shared credential login group, the setting in there. And that's basically when that session gets created. It takes that value at that time and sets this is when the session will end. So if you don't have an upper limit on that, that just won't get set, and you would have to rely on either the person manually logging out, which probably will never happen.
So like in this case,
Yes.
what will happen?
In this case right now, when someone logs in, your session, there's no upper limit for how long the session can last, as long as the device stays active on the network.
Oh.
But if your device goes away, you'll kill that session and free it up for another device. Okay, that makes sense, everybody?
What if that device then re-authenticates, like come back and
It makes a new session,
conversation,
and the same rules apply.
and then it will again send a landing for a splash portal?
It depends on your automatic login configuration. So there's two different places that you can configure the automatic login. One of those is in the Splash portal. So if you've got your device in an IP group that has a Splash portal attached to it, and the device shows up on the network, and you have background mode set to max, as it is here, it's going to automatically create that session. There's also the ability to do portal automatic login, so like when a device gets on the network and they actually hit the portal, whether or not they're automatically logged in there. And sometimes you may want to kind of combine those values where a device shows up on the network and we create a login session for it so that the device can get to the internet, but maybe we don't want to automatically log it into the portal where they have control over the device list and stuff like that. We have some customers who want to kind of manage have like basically an account owner who can go in and make those kind of changes, update their profile and stuff. And the devices underneath the account, they want them to get logged in to get access to the internet, but they don't want them to get logged into the portal where they can kind of make account changes like update payment methods and stuff like that. Yes.
Maybe I steal some thunder of a later slide or later demo, but I just had the idea of, because of behavioral network, you talked portal, but you can also assign rules/policies to other devices. My idea is coming down from the IoT way. If you've got an IoT device which is only supposed to do sensing something or reporting something, but that behavior changes, then you kind of throw a thing back at the device while it's changing its behavior.
As an example, what exactly do you mean by that?
Okay,
What kind of change are you
I
looking
mean,
to?
change of behavior. So normally it's talking to certain ports only, but if it starts changing, talking to something, or starts sweeping, like,
You would have to basically have a policy targeted to that device that's monitoring for those things. And
any
whenever
change will be alerted and then
Yeah.
things can trigger. Okay.
So you can either set it up to just get an alert, or you can automatically shift it to a different policy for a given period of time. Yeah.
Can you go to identities and accounts real fast? So that expiration column, where
Yes.
exactly is that coming from?
This is coming from the usage plan. Yes. So. This particular usage plan that these accounts are tied to has a 7-day lifetime.
Okay.
So from the time that gets applied to the account, 7 days from that time, the account will expire and they'll be taken back to the portal.
So if you edited a usage plan after users already logged in,
It does not automatically apply to the account.
so
But if you change under the account,
Yes.
expiration date will be effective. Can you please
Yeah, so you can,
For every
you can
individual,
manually,
right?
Yes.
You'd have to do it individually.
yeah.
So there's no way, is there any way to boot all users to force them to log in again to have a new policy kick in?
Well, you could likely don't want to delete their accounts. There are ways that you can do some things like that through like the command line going into the Rails console, which is basically like a back end to the whole database that runs everything in here. And you know, let's say what you mentioned before, you make a change to the usage plan to have the ability to go in and apply that plan to all of the accounts that are currently have that plan. You could do that through the Rails console. I don't believe that that behavior is exposed to the GUI at the moment. But the nice thing about everything being tied into one single database, when you go in and either through the Rails console or through a custom portal, maybe there's some action in there. One of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit later on is some kind of admin type portals, which is basically we have people who want to have sort of like a simplified way for an operator or maybe like a front desk person to do various tasks on the network. All of the stuff that's in the admin UI is available to be manipulated through a custom portal as well as through the Rails console. So all of those things are certainly possible. And the things that aren't currently available to do just via pushing a button in the GUI, we could either, if there's a real need for something like that, we can always look at adding something like that in. And if not, there are other ways around it. The account list. Oh, I'm in the account right now. Inside this billing section, you see there's a checkbox here for apply plan. If you check that box and then you update the account, it's going to go pull the new values from the usage plan and apply it to this account.
Oh, okay.
But you just have to do it to each account.
Change the policy first and then do that to every.
Yeah. I could show you the way to do it through the Rails console if it's something that you're interested in. I can just grab me at some point later and I can go through it.
Is it possible to delete a policy from council slash group?
Yes.
Just pick up whatever policies they fall into.
No.
What happens?
You would end up in a situation where you've got an ambiguous state. So if you are deleting policies, you want to make sure that you're assigning those groups to some other policy. You should not, there is a default policy where if you have a device on the network that doesn't fall into a particular group, it will get the default policy. But what you want to make sure that you have a policy tied to each group. When you perform a global search, and you've got a situation like that, you will have a warning. So right at the moment, it's telling you it's unable to determine group membership, probably because this is not an act on the network right now. But if you've got a device that's a member of a group that doesn't have a policy attached, you'll have a separate warning here telling you, highest precedence group does not have a policy. And that's something that you want to avoid. You shouldn't end up in that situation. So anytime that you're deciding you want to delete a policy, you should make note of what's attached to it and make sure that you get that assigned to something else.
I think the question though is if you have more than one policy on a group, and you delete
You
one.
don't have more than one policy.
You don't.
You can only have one policy. It's a singular group association to group to policy. You can have
Right.
more than one group on a policy, but you can't have more than one policy on a group. So if I look at this particular policy diagram right at the moment, you can see we've got most of the groups have most of the policies have one group tied to it. But you can see like this onboarding policy has two groups and it's also marked as the default policy. So you can certainly have that situation, but what you won't have is two lines coming out from a particular group to two different policies. You can't have that. So anywhere you go in and you look at one of those groups, you'll see that that's just a drop-down menu, not a checkbox where you can select multiple things. So it just won't let you configure it like that. Okay, now we kind of jumped around a little bit there. Yeah.
So it's just obviously I was stumbling on nomenclature. So in the graph, all right, so from left to right you have groups, policies, then what's the right column?
Enforcement. So that's like the splash boards or the all those different things, all the stuff that we're going through, each of those, and you can obviously have multiple different types of enforcement tied to a particular policy. And you'll see some systems where this graph is like spaghetti with stuff going everywhere. You do have the ability to click in to one of these particular policies and get a filtered view of that particular policy. That helps you kind of visualize it a little bit better when you've got something really complex. But yeah. So,
Okay, it's the policy versus enforcement nomenclature I had wrong.